Welcome to the College Admission Lab from Khan Lab School. I'm Brennan Barnard, College Counseling Advisor at KLS, and I'm joined today by our founder, Sal Khan. And Sal is also the founder and CEO of Khan Academy and Schoolhouse.World and Khan World School. And our guest is Emily Roper-Doten, who is Dean of Admission at Brandeis University. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here
Thank
as
you.
always.
So this evening, Sal is again going to take the host role as we discuss the changing landscape of college admission in 2026. And please share your questions in the Q&A. And also in the chat, we'd love to just hear where people are zooming in from and whether you're a student or a parent or educator. So feel free to put that in the chat to everyone. And while they do that, Emily, could you maybe just, before we turn it over to Sal to ask some questions, can you start by just giving us a brief overview of your kind of educational and career journey, how you got to where you are?
Sure. I'm the product of a small liberal arts college. I went to Colgate University in upstate New York, and I studied educational studies and theater after various routes through multiple different major choices. And then really found that I fell in love with being working in the admission office as an undergraduate. And so I started asking the people in that office, like, what you do seems fun. How do I get to be you? And so I had lots of conversations with them, kind of informational interview style, and decided I'd go to grad school for higher education administration first. So I could test that theory that admission is what I wanted to do. So that brought me to BC for graduate school. And then my first admission job, grad school validated that I wanted to do admissions work. My first job was at Olin College of Engineering, which is a small engineering-only project-based engineering undergraduate school in Needham, Massachusetts. And so I just thought, how could I not have my first job in admission be at a place that had no graduates yet? We don't found that many colleges and universities here in the US. And so the opportunity was too exciting. So I was there for a couple of years at Olin, and then I bounced over to Tufts, where I worked for 9 years in various roles in the admissions office. And then had the opportunity in 2015 to actually go back to Olin as the Dean of Admission. And Olin being a place that was sort of new and spunky, a bit of a unicorn school, got to do some really exciting things there. And I do think my time at Olin really kind of shaped my philosophy around leadership. And then I missed my liberal arts roots a bit. So I bopped back to the liberal arts. And I spent a few years as the vice president for undergraduate admissions and financial assistance at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then last spring, I got wind that they were doing some interesting things at Brandeis, and I think my time at Olin sort of primed me for institutions that are really active. They're responsive to challenges in ways that are creative and interesting. And so I joined the Brandeis team as the Dean of Admissions this summer. So it's been, I don't know, 6-ish months, and it's a fantastic community. I'm excited to be a part of it. And I'm definitely an admissions nerd and can talk anybody's ear off about it.
Well, and this, thank you. And it's that same kind of innovative spirit that drew me, I think, as you know, drew me to Khan Lab School. So um, uh, I I'm interested to hear more about what Brandeis is doing and around the liberal arts. And Sal, I'll turn it over to you to kind of dig in a bit.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Brennan. And Emily, I didn't realize I have a loose connection to Olin. My academic advisor as an undergrad, Lynn Stein at MIT, I believe helped start Olin in
Oh, the
some.
amazing Lynn Stein. She was one
Yes.
of the founding faculty members for sure.
Yes, I remember back in the day, shortly after I had graduated, she went and started doing the whole. So we're all connected in some way.
Isn't that amazing?
Well, I wanted, there's so much I want to talk about. I want to get into the admissions, but I'm especially happy to talk to you, Emily, today based on what I hear is going on at Brandeis. Because if you asked me like 5 years ago, what should someone major in? I had an opinion. I'd say, well, of course, it depends on what you are interested in and your strengths, but I had an opinion about what were the skills that the job market was looking for, et
Mhm.
cetera. Now I don't want to say all bets are off, but it's a very different environment. A lot of fields that 3 years ago were the hottest fields. People are saying maybe AI changes things. Maybe AI is
Right.
making some other things more valuable, or maybe even, college education as a whole is, coming into the question. So, what's interesting about Brandeis, and I'd love to learn more about this, is y'all are looking seriously at what is a liberal arts education? Does it need to be reinvented, or how could it be? And at the same time, and sometimes these have been like oil and water, which has been one of my complaints sometimes about higher education, is how could you get someone career ready? Sometimes a lot of folks have, especially in higher education, said, no, 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 we're here to teach you how to think. We're not here for your jobs. It's like, yeah, but I kind of need a job too. So what, tell us what y'all are doing, because it sounds like y'all are tackling both.
Yeah. So I think it is in Brandeis's DNA to meet the moment, to not be afraid to sort of step out and be bold, right? When you're founded in 1948 at a time when anti-Semitism was rampant in the country, and you're saying we need to found a college that is built upon the ideals of access and social justice, right? So Brandeis was already kind of always leaned in to how do we assess what's needed and make really big moves to do that. And so, sort of reinventing the liberal arts is really how we've been thinking about this, where we're not abandoning the liberal arts. We're not leaving it behind. We do still think that you need the skills and the ability to think, right? So there's still that undergraduate liberal arts core, a really strong core foundation that we're imagining around a set of core competencies as opposed to a collection of courses. So really thinking about certainly critical thinking, communications, leadership, digital fluency, the types of core kind of enduring skills that people need that they can get through that core curriculum. We still think it's important for you to have that content knowledge in the degree you're going to choose. And our Brandeis students are very good at picking double majors, majors and minors, triple minors. They're sort of polymaths in that way. They love to kind of do lots of things. But we want to help them think about not just what's the job going to be when you graduate, but how do we help arm you with the skills, develop the skills, assess the skills so that you can actually show to employers, to graduate schools, yes, you have this degree in a specialty. Yes, you have that liberal arts foundation, but you have a second transcript that will include things like very micro credentials for us to be able to say, we've assessed this skill set. So we're looking at two different ways to do that. Part of that is through courses. So there may be some courses where you're gaining a skill set through multiple different courses that their course titles don't necessarily tell you the whole story. We're piloting 5 new micro-credentials this semester: applied statistical analysis, foundations of data analytics, person-centered research and analysis, policy analysis and implementation, and sound and video media. And so thinking about how some of like those skills students may develop in courses. There'll be courses that they're not designed just for that, but the students are going to be practicing them there. But also thinking about the undergraduate experience brings research opportunities, internships, opportunities as student leaders or during student activities to gain skill sets. If I think about that last one, that sound and video media, you might have a student who's taking a set of courses where they're learning some of those skills, but maybe they're also the sound designer for our theater department, and they're able to actually gain skills in that environment. They can then put that learning together and put that sort of nominate themselves for an assessment in that micro credential. So we are going to be validating these skills. It's not just putting your hand up and saying, I've done this thing, but really saying through these courses, through these other experiences, we're able to kind of validate those skills for you. We want students to be able to turn to that employer and not just say, yes, I have this degree, which their employer is not going to look at their transcript, right? They're not looking for the grades and the names of courses that don't tell them what someone can do. They're looking for those experiences and skill sets. And so thinking about how do we marry these two things so that they're not oil and water pushing, at odds with each other, pulling at someone's time, but that an undergraduate experience can be unified in both of those goals.
I
And
love it because normally these things are two separate things, as we just said, and there's a tension, but you've made it complementary. In some ways, it liberates the liberal arts when you are able to say, but we're also going to distill out the skill competencies, the career competencies that you're going to build along the way. Brendan, you're going to add something to that?
yeah, no, I was just going to say, and what's the assessment? I guess it depends on the micro credential, but they're basically showing competency or mastery in those micro credentials?
So you're absolutely right that it depends on what the micro-credential specifically is. And these 5 that I named, they're the ones that we're piloting right now. We will continue to develop them. Our faculty will develop them. We're in conversation with a number of our employer partners, folks that have come to Brandeis for years to recruit, that bring students there as interns all the time, to be constantly in communication with those folks about what do you need now, but what are you going to need in 5, 10 years? What, like, not just sort of the like this moment, but how do we think about skill development? So the assessment may be very different depending on what the skill itself is. So it may be a performance, it may be a presentation, it's likely not to be a written exam. It's likely to be some true demonstration and external validation. So it's not just the assessment is not the grade in the class, if there's a class associated with it, but really how do you pull what you learned in this class? Maybe it's 2 classes, maybe it's 3 classes, or a class and an experiential learning opportunity, like you're doing a year-long research project with a faculty member, talking about some data analytics there that you're able to actually really pull from that practical experience. You will the idea is to prove that you can do it so that we can validate for you in that credential.
And that answers, I saw through the chat, Devin Scarrett had asked essentially that question. What informs it? And you said it is the employers.
So we're doing, there's a lot of data that we've been mining, sort of thinking about, what careers are sunsetting, what are gaining ground, how do we start to think about what may change? So there's a piece that is certainly related to how do we ingest the information about the current environment and be thinking about where it's going, so that we can not just say these are the things we're good at, right? Like we're not just trying to build it upon what are the current specialties of our faculty, but what are the things that we need? How do we survey our alumni? How do we survey students when they come back from internships to say, what are the skills that you were learning on the job, while you were there, or the things you heard? Like, how do we gather that information to make smart choices about what we're going to lean into?
That makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious, and you know, I don't know if you have a strong view on this, but I'm curious how you're handling AI within the school itself. I talked to a freshman that we know, and I'm not going to say where he goes to school, but he was, when we took him out for lunch, he was all stressed about his midterms, and they were all take-home assignments. He's a liberal arts major, and I said, what percentage of your classmates are using Chat GPT to do their assignments? And, I don't know if this is an exaggeration, but this is what he said. He said 95%. And I
Yeah.
said, and what about you? He's like, no, I don't touch it. I was like, how does that make you feel? He says, it makes me feel horrible. I'm the
Oh, no.
5%, or
Yeah.
at least he feels like he's in this 5%. And it is the question where there, so much of a traditional liberal arts education is reading a lot, writing a lot. And there is a world now where if you want to take shortcuts, the AI can give you the cliff notes. They can answer your questions, any take-home assignment. And at the same time, when these people graduate, you want them to be able to create artifacts faster and using AI, but also put their own lens on it. So, part of me is like, wow, I feel like the people who are using the AI are a little bit shady, but at the same time, they might be building a really valuable skill that I might want to hire them for. So how's Brandeis thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it's as we think about what are some of those kind of enduring skills, if one of those things is really thinking about, um, I don't know if I want to use the term digital fluency, but sort of thinking about it's not just, it's knowing that we can't ignore it. We can't try to pretend, we can't become traditionalists and sort of dig down and say that we have to go back, right? We actually have to think about how do we teach students the skills of their own interpretation and assessment of what is AI doing, what is the benefit for me to do this, how do I validate different sources, right? How do I think about, I mean, we think about this even too as we're thinking about a website redesign, that we have to redesign our website for AI, right?
Mhm.
Where what was it, 10 years ago? It was like, you have to redesign your website for mobile because everybody's looking at it on a mobile device. So you wanted it to be responsive, but really thinking about people aren't clicking links that often, right, anymore. And so how do you make sure that your website is designed in a way that the AI is going to pull the things about your institution that are true, right? So that are in there. So I think it's about, for us, faculty helping students with parameters around maybe this is good for brainstorming, or maybe this is good for editing, or how do you make sure that your ideas are complemented by things that you can find in a digital environment, and how do you really validate what your sources are, being able to help. It in some ways it's still related to some of those core skills. Why this is why we're not abandoning the liberal arts, but those core skills of critical thinking and being able to deeply engage with something. And so our hope is, of course, that the shortcut is a piece of that like maybe that's a piece or a building block in a greater sort of learning journey, but how do you help someone understand how it can serve you well and ethically and all of those different pieces. So it's a lot about how helping students understand how. I think we
And
can't avoid it.
one last question, and then I'm going to go more big picture, and I want to bring Brennan into it as well. Is where do you think your best sense of where Brandeis or higher education in general is on that journey? Because I agree with what you're saying, and a lot of professors, what I've seen in many places, like, oh, use AI for this, but you're not allowed to use AI for that, and they have an honor
Mm.
code. But what I'm hearing is, no, people are using AI for the other thing as well. And so when you do that take-home 10-page term paper, when we were in school, we had to, it took us a long time to get that first draft. Now using AI, it takes you 10 minutes to get that first draft. Now, someone who's thoughtful can then tweak that draft and make it into a really nice paper. But do you think that, the liberal arts education has adapted to that reality, or do you think there's some denial, or it's a mixed bag?
I think you have a lot of faculty who are starting or who are very thoughtful and creative around what does my assessment need to look like? If I can easily see the ways in which my students will use AI to take all of the shortcuts, how do I actually come up with a new way to do this, right? Like, am I bringing things back into the classroom in different, am I looking at conversations in the classroom in a different way? Am I looking at what they're producing on this, in a on-demand sort of way? Am I having them do, extemporaneous responses in a video recording to a prompt to be able to get to how can we find where the thinking is and how can we make sure that we're providing opportunities for students to demonstrate what they know and what they're learning, where it's a little harder for them to utilize that technology, knowing that there may be times where it's going to happen. So I think, we have an incredibly dedicated faculty that I think are wrestling with all these questions. And I think it does come down to thinking about how do we reshape assessment and education, knowing that it's there and not just give up, not
Yeah.
just throw up our hands.
And speaking of assessment, and in some ways, college admissions is one of the most important forms of assessment that goes on. Um, how do you think AI is changing that? I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, or everyone really is talking about it. Is for a long time, at least the belief was, well, if you have, some families hire these consultants to help kids with essays, and there's like this big, I would say, more ethical gray area on like how much help is too much help. And now with AI, are y'all thinking about changing how you evaluate?
Mm.
Are you assuming people are just going to use AI? Where is the line? And Brennan, I'd love, after Emily, I'd love your take on that too. You advise a lot of students on obviously going through the process.
Yeah, I think I was on a panel once with a number of other colleagues on the admission side, and someone said, now we have AI. We've always had PI and CI, parental intelligence and counselor intelligence, right? Were there always opportunities for someone to overstep, sort of creep into the process. I think a lot of us, when we're having conversations with students now, when we're invited to be a part of that conversation, which is a lot of fun for us, but is trying to remind students again of not shortchanging themselves the journey, right? Not shortchanging themselves and letting AI misrepresent them if they're going to over rely on it. I think we do have to assume, and we do have to assume there's a significant amount of AI usage out there. When it comes to things like essay writing. And so you might see institutions that are keeping supplemental essay questions so that they can try to have something that's a little bit less easy, maybe for AI to kind of help them with, or video prompts, sort of that on-demand extemporaneous. We're going to give you a prompt and give you a minute to answer it to try to do those things. I think we do find. For Brandeis, we don't have additional essay questions. We use the Common Application in the Coalition, and we use their main essay as the student's writing sample. But we're looking at what are all the different pieces that we have as part of this assessment. So we're looking at what are we hearing, what we're hearing from the recommendations in line with what we're sort of seeing from the student in terms of what they're submitting to us in writing. Does it align with what we're seeing in their, in a short answer that's there? Is it aligning with what we might have in an interview? And so trying to kind of calibrate or corroborate the information across these different sources. And we know a lot of counselors are using AI to write their letters because it's that they're basing it in foundations, understandings of the students and anecdotes and those sorts of things, but maybe getting it over the hump, right? Taking that bulleted list and turning it into a letter. It's helping them over there.
Spending more time with kids, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, it's that triangulation of all the information coming in. And it's interesting because and Sal, this is I mean, it's close to something you wrote about in your book in Brave New Words and so Initial View that has done interviews, you might have seen this with they're piloting it with Caltech and a couple other schools where they have something called Viva, and they basically you take a piece of research. I'm dumbing it down a little, but you take some research or something you've done and feed it into this AI interface, and then it develops questions and it has a conversation with you about your research, and you answer the questions, and that gets fed to the college admissions
Is
offices.
that thing proctored, or you do it kind of on your own time?
You do it on your own time, I
Okay,
believe.
okay. So there
Yeah.
might still be a little bit of.
Um, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think there are these ways to get at different angles of students and their story and what they bring to the table. And so as we think about kind of this changing landscape of college admission, I think the ways that the essay will still be play a role at some schools, but I think we're going to see some of these things, these other things, be more prevalent in the way students can kind of express themselves.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It sounds. I think y'all are both saying that there's some core truth to the student. Like if you just told Chat GPT or some AI to write an essay for the Common App without some core truth, it's not going to be a great essay. It's going to feel very
Right.
generic. And it sounds like it's probably okay if you can feed the AI a lot of core truth. I mean, Emily, you mentioned that, counselors and teachers might already be doing this, and that's okay. They have a bunch of bullet points. They know the student. They can do kind of a brain dump of like, oh, this is how I know Sal,
They
blah,
can
blah, blah, blah.
expedite that part. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it can construct it. And in some ways, it levels the playing field because some teachers have more time and are more artful about exactly how knowing how to craft it, and some don't. But they can take that core knowledge and put it into a nice framework. And it sounds like if a student, as you mentioned, a parent or a consultant, they've always kind of the ethical ones have always done that. The horrible ones like Varsity Blues make up the core knowledge, but the ethical ones would take some of that core knowledge. It's like, no, you do this amazing stuff. You should present yourself better in that. So, if we imagine a world where if I'm a student and I just speak in an audio file for like half an hour about all of my hopes and fears and passions and about myself, etc. And I put it into an AI, and I also put some of the prompts, and the AI says, well, this is you mentioned this thing for this prompt. You should talk more about this. And maybe here's a maybe that's
Like, and then
that
it becomes a coach.
yeah, would that be okay? Is that kind of in the if
I mean, I think we haven't talked about the is there AI usage on the review side, which is
yeah,
certainly
yeah,
another whole conversation.
yeah.
But I think I was on a panel last night with three other admission folks from different places, and we all came back. There were a lot of questions there about AI, and we all kept coming back to we all still fundamentally believe this is a human process. And so, what we're hoping is to see as much of that human student come through as possible in the ways that they can bring it to us. Certainly, if someone's not spending a lot of time, if someone is churning out an AI essay, right, they're giving it, the minimal amount of information, it's not going to feel like them.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not going to have enough depth. It's going to feel a little bit thin in terms of that piece of the puzzle. Certainly, there is still transcript and, possibly testing and recommendations and extracurriculars that paint a big piece of that picture. And we all stressed last night that using AI on the essay feels like it's shortchanging the one part of the application process that you have the most control over as a senior, right? Your transcript's almost done. The opinions of your teachers are pretty much fixed. Your extracurriculars are nearing their end. You have the most control over your essay. And so do you want to surrender that to technology, sort of putting your voice out there? And so I think there are a lot of us who don't who are whether it's optimistic or too Pollyanna-ish, but believing that there's ways that we can still understand students, even if they're using it. But I also think maybe there's a little piece of um, does this also put a little bit more choice in the student's hands, right? Sort of thinking about if if we're getting a little bit more, if we're getting less information, sort of about the student, we're making those decisions based on things that are more the academic core, right? The more of those kind of the things you can sort of count, the data pieces or the extracurricular pieces. And so their choice of where to apply, their choice of where to go, those are even bigger in their sort of their longer journey of where they end up.
So what I'm kind of hearing, and I think I agree with this, is you don't want to, it's not even going to help you if you cede control of this process. I mean, this process is, we all think it's a great process just to figure out about yourself. I think adults should go through the admissions process. I mean, the hard part is there's all this stress and people are thinking about what do these other people want to hear and all this. I'm like, no, don't do this. Just say who you are. But as long as you don't cede control, it's really authentically you. But maybe if you do use these tools to kind of get you started to maybe get over a little bit of the writer's block, but don't rely on them. I mean, make sure it's you that comes out. It could be okay. Because I've seen the other side where I think I've seen some amazing students who I think just that blank page of the essay just freezes them up and they end up writing it's almost like when they write it by themselves, they write a more generic essay because they're so afraid to take, I don't know. You don't see their personality come through because they're over engineering it. Well, I know we have very limited time. We started a little late. I have one last question, and it kind of connects us to the beginning, and I'd love, Brendan, both yours and Emily's points of view on this. We've been talking a lot about AI for the application, AI at school, what's the future of jobs, liberal arts education, et cetera. What do both of y'all say to folks who are increasingly afraid or skeptical of higher education in general? I don't know what the fully loaded cost of a year at Brandeis is, but I know many private institutions are pushing $90,000, $100,000 a year when all in, if you don't get financial aid. I know a lot of places have very generous financial aid, so it's much lower. But if you're thinking about 4 years of that could easily cost the equivalent of a very nice house in most of the country. And there still might be uncertainty about jobs, et cetera. So Emily, how do you think about that? And then I'd love to hear from you too, Brendan.
So there's no way my answer is not going to be colored by my experience at Brandeis right now. I think, there's the Emily exclusive answer that really leans back into what we were just talking about, into don't squander the opportunity to have time to learn and discern and capture, kind of who you are, and figure out what you want to do with that. I still do feel that personally, that there's a value in that 4 years as being a part of your becoming, right? Becoming who you're going to be. I do think that there are institutions, and Brandeis certainly is among them, that's really thinking about how do we make sure that you feel this was a smart investment, that you feel that you can come out of this experience having had not only fantastic in person, in classroom experiences where you're becoming an expert on a particular subject area, but that we're guaranteeing that everyone is going to have at least one. Already at Brandeis, the average of the average number of internship or research experiences a student has is 2 to 3. So we're but guaranteeing that every student is going to have some kind of deep experiential learning opportunity. We're starting out talking. We piloted this year at orientation, an orientation session with career services, and the idea wasn't to sort of scare them into we're going to talk about the end at the beginning. But how do we help you think about creating a path over 4 years that's leading somewhere, and that it can have twists and turns and you can jump, onto different roads. But how do we start having conversations about how do you build experiences in order to get you where you're going? And we feel like things like these micro credentials, the ability to sort of assess and showcase these competencies for employers, it's kind of the supports under that bridge that gets you to the job later on, and your ability to say And part of what we're doing as part of this investment in this reimagined liberal arts is we've created a center for applied liberal arts and careers, and they're providing a career advisor which will be in addition to the normal faculty advisor that someone would have for all 4 years for every student. And so if someone comes in saying, I think I want to do this, they've got a faculty advisor helping them figure out what's the academic path, but they've got a career advisor helping them think about, okay, what experiences help you validate that that's actually what you want to do, right? We've started a job shadowing program for students to be able to actually try it out. But then how do you start to build the internship base to say, oh, I think, I thought I wanted to do something in finance, and someone does an internship in finance, and they're able to talk to their career advisor after and say, I mean, I liked parts of it, but maybe I don't want to do finance anymore. And that person can help them realize, oh, maybe it's still finance, but it's a different industry. Or, change that to engineering and the same thing, or change, so thinking about how do we help students so that they're not just coming out saying, I have this diploma that says I'm an expert in this, but I'm not totally sure what I'm ready for. Helping students be able to develop that critical content sort of expertise in their sort of liberal arts area, but also having someone with them and an entire university saying, we're gonna help you, we're gonna paint the bricks a few feet ahead of you to help you get to where you're going, so students feel really confident in the skills that they have and the choices that they're making. So I think when families are thinking about where they want to go, like asking tough questions about, what's your job placement rate? What's your internship rate? What's the return rate for interns at a particular company? Who's coming to recruit on your campus? How do you make sure that these experiences happen? How do you help my kid figure this out? Right? I think like sometimes, and even I would say in the late 90s, maybe in early 2000s in upstate New York, I took my classes and I loved what I did, but I didn't necessarily have someone saying, well, what are you going to do with this? I could activate myself and go to career services if I really wanted to and figure in, but having some really structured ways for students to start thinking about this as part of what they're doing over the course of these 4 years, building getting a job after graduation really shouldn't start senior year. Like this is kind of what we're thinking about. How do we get you there?
Oh, I love that. It's very, very compelling, and it gives Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I worry when we have these kind of conversations about not just the value of college, but different things in our society, right? They become so polarized. Like either college is worth it or it's not, right? And it's just not that simple. And I'm actually going to put a link in the chat here to a Forbes piece I read this morning by I forget who it's by, but it's about this very issue. And I mean, when you look at the lifetime earnings of a college graduate versus a high school graduate, I mean, it still shows that there is value.
Although not to nitpick, but that one might be correlation versus causation. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
it might
yeah,
be those
right.
that finished college would have made more money anyway. But anyway, let's keep running with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I'm saying is that I think when it's not, it doesn't have to be either or. And I think when we talk in absolutes, or when we don't look at the kind of the many different affordable pathways to college. There are many, and so it doesn't have to be the cost of a house, or it doesn't. There's ways to do it, and so I think the ability. I don't think college is for everyone. I think some people don't go to college and have very successful and happy lives. But I also think there is value to that kind of learning to think critically and to network, and so um, I think it's a complicated issue that I hope we can continue to look at in depth.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no. Well, there's so much to talk about. I want to thank y'all both. And I agree with what y'all said at the end. I think colleges can and be very powerful for a very large number of students. And it might not be the right thing for a very large amount. But I think, and I'm glad, Emily, everything you said, as you said, when we were all in school, you had to be a little bit proactive yourself to think about your career, and sometimes career and academic was a little bit, oil and water, like we talked about. But it's really refreshing to see universities like Brandeis be very intentional and think about that from, because that's what I've always told young people. I was like, no matter what you major in, ask those hard questions from the beginning. What's the job placement rate? Talk to seniors who are looking for jobs. Talk to recent grads. Hey, did you get what you want? How much you're making? Are you stressed out? Do you wish you majored in something else? Do you wish you went to a different school? And ask those questions. But in the society we are in, still, many of the most sought after jobs, not all, not only is college a part of it, but I think all of us, well, not everyone, but many of us, I'm in the same bucket, look fondly on those years that I would not, someone couldn't pay me $1 billion to give up my, 4 years in college and all of the friendships and life experiences. And I met my wife in college. So priceless.
Smart man.
Well, with that, thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone who attended tonight. And we'll be back next month with another, and we'll send it out to everyone who registered, and appreciate you joining us. And Emily, thanks for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.